Good morning once again. I am Stephanie Ruhle joining you live from Times Square, where it is 9 a.m. on the East Coast, 6 a.m. out west. And we are 69 days away from the midterms. As we come on the air today, President Donald Trump's endorsements held up in two big Republican runoffs. His pick for Oklahoma governor and the Republican nomination won in a tight race last night. And Darlene Graham beat Congressman Ralph Norman in the South Carolina race for Senate. The political newcomer and, of course, sister of the late Senator Lindsey Graham overcame a major debate gaffe last week and had the president's 11th hour support with a rally last week and his super PAC spending about $825,000 on last-minute voter outreach. Now, some Republican strategists want to know when Trump will give candidates that are in actual battleground states what they're calling the Darlene Graham treatment. That is according to Politico. Republicans are hoping the president will give that same time and money to candidates in states like Texas, North Carolina, and Georgia, where they really need it. But the president is making it harder on his own party by getting into another trade war with America's second largest trading partner, and I can't seem to figure out why. Canada has now officially announced retaliatory tariffs on American goods to match the ones that President Trump imposed. And as the Washington Post points out, states like Maine, Michigan, and Iowa not only depend on international trade from Canada, they're also incredibly important in these midterms. Now, remember, I got questions, and I know you do too. What do you want to know about the midterms, the economy, the war in Iran? Take your pick. Just scan the QR code on your screen. Send us your questions. We're going to try to get to them later in the program. But for now, let's get smarter with the help of our lead-off panel. MS Now congressional reporter Michael Schnell is here. She's joining us live from South Carolina. Zach Stanton joins us, deputy managing editor of news for MS Now, and Luke Broadwater, Pulitzer Prize-winning White House correspondent for the New York Times. Okay, Zach, this is your first visit to Money, Power, and Politics, so help us out. There are two ways to look at South Carolina. On one hand, the president's endorsement helped a political newcomer who made an enormous gaffe in the runoff in this runoff last week. But on the other hand, she only won by 5 points after he threw so much political capital and money into this race. How do you see it?
You know, I think you have to look at what Trump spent here, both in the sense of actually unleashing money from the MAGA Inc. super PAC, which has amassed $400 million and not really spent much of any of it on candidates, aside from Darlene Graham, who had spent $825,000 backing at the last second. It's a state that he traveled to for an in-person rally. He did a tele-rally there. He endorsed her. He encouraged her to run in the first place. Just 6 weeks ago, she was effectively an unknown. And so at this point, it's a real question of all of this is in a state he won 3 times, and she carried by a total of 5 points. And so is his backing really still determinative in a primary? It seems so, but it could be a liability in most other general elections. But I'd be curious what the view is in South Carolina, and I know Michael has been there too. Well,
that's who I'm going to next. Take us to South Carolina, Michael.
Steph, one of the biggest themes that I was hearing from voters in the past few days when I've been here is why they were wrestling so deeply with this decision, because on one hand, they wanted to support the president's endorsement. As Zach said, President Trump could not have been more all in on this race if he tried. Let's remember, folks, when Henry McMaster had appointed Darlene Graham to be the caretaker for this seat, there was no expectation that she would run for the full 6-year term. But when it was reported that she was interested, the president went all in on her. So I heard from voters who were saying, on one hand, we want to back the president, but on the other hand, she doesn't have experience. And by the way, that was a concern from day one, and her debate performance only exacerbated it. The voters I spoke to said they were undecided and they were going to make this decision in the final moments before they cast their ballots. It seems, based on these results, that in that binary choice, President Trump won out over the question of experience. But to Zach's point, this may work in a primary across the country. We're going to have to see how these primary candidates now fare in these general elections.
Luke, there's all this news that Republicans are frustrated that Donald Trump put so much time and so much money into a safe red primary as opposed to crucial battleground states. But listen, on its face, 800 grand is a lot of money, but his war chest is 400 million. He's still got a lot to go around.
Yeah, he absolutely does. But I do think this whole scene underscores what Donald Trump's true goal is, and that is to maintain control over the Republican Party, and to maintain control over the Republican Party, perhaps even after he leaves office, to still be the dominant kingmaker within the Republican Party. So he does care a lot about who wins in these deep red states, who wins these primaries. Look at how much time he spent against Thomas Massie, for instance. I mean, that's a Kentucky Congress seat. That's not going to the Democrats. You know, if people at all opposed him at any point in time, like Ralph Norman did backing Nikki Haley, he is going to go out of his way to make sure he has a Trump loyalist candidate who supports him lockstep, and that he can point to say, look, if you oppose me, you're out of politics. We will defeat you with a MAGA person.
All right, Michael, now that we're in the general, there are all sorts of people who are going to vote who are not affiliated with a party. You have been on the campaign trail. You're talking to people from state to state. We already have high prices in this country, and now we've got a potentially new trade war.
Yeah, Steph, it's not going to be helpful. And look, we know that voters vote based on their pocketbooks and what they see at the gas station and what they see at the grocery store. Gas prices are already elevated right now because of the war in Iran. So now starting a trade war with Canada, add more tariffs, that's not going to help anything. And in fact, it's on the minds of voters. I spoke to one voter on Monday here in Columbia, a grocery store clerk. So he is innately aware of these grocery prices. He said, yes, prices are up. And by the way, despite the administration saying that this is not going to be felt by the consumer, this voter told me the burden is led onto the consumer. It makes the consumer have to take more money out of their pocketbook. And by the way, those consumers are voters. So certainly it's a peculiar moment right now to be getting into a trade war with an ally like Canada, knowing that affordability is the name of the game in this cycle, knowing that Democrats are going so all in on messaging on that matter, because in previous cycles that has been the name of the game. So it certainly is not going to help these Republican candidates. And again, I think that it can't be underscored enough. This comes on top of those elevated gas prices. I spoke to a number of Republican lawmakers over recent months. That one lawmaker told me those gas signs are 2 feet tall in the air. You can't miss them. Everyone can see them. Republicans have full control of Washington right now. If voters are seeing their gas prices increase and their grocery store prices increase, it's not going to be a good reflection on Republican candidates.
Yeah, and Trump has told voters paying more for gas is a small price to pay to keep nuclear power out of the Iranians' hands. And the president isn't even talking about their nuclear capabilities anymore. At this point, it's only about the Strait of Hormuz, which was open before the war. Zach, how do Republicans balance this, right? They want Trump's money, and they also want his support. He's clearly the leader of the party, but at the same time, he's deeply unpopular, and he's leading an even more unpopular war.
That's right. You know, the main things the Republicans want from Donald Trump are money and, right now, distance. And they're not getting much of either. You know, there was reporting overnight from The Atlantic that the $400 million fund that he has for MAGA Inc. is going to be used to spend on ads, boosting him and litigating his record. And that's really against what the Republican whole strategy has been this cycle, which has been to make this a choice election between Democrats and Republicans. You know, you've seen people like Speaker Mike Johnson use this phrase, common sense versus crazy. But I think to a lot of voters, you know, attacking Iran, shutting down the Strait of Hormuz, doesn't exactly seem common sense. And so you have both that and then Trump making the election about himself. And you really question whether this is to Republicans' benefit or whether this is just more about vanity.
Yeah, but of course, his common sense versus crazy is Mike Johnson wanting to go down a path of talking about transgender athletes and stuff like that, when the common sense is about making life more affordable, making health care affordable, not going into an unnecessary trade war with Canada. But here's the thing, Luke. I wonder if the president is truly remains in this gilded cage. It's like, is he aware of his approval ratings? Because he wants these midterms to be about him. He does not want it to be. He doesn't want anybody to be distanced. He is, in a couple weeks, he's holding this huge midterms convention, and The Atlantic is reporting he plans to spend super PAC money buying ads featuring him talking about his big accomplishments. I can't wait to see them because I'd love to know what they are.
Yeah, I mean, Donald Trump is in a bubble. That's pretty clear. He gets information from sources that tells him what he wants to hear. He is at his lowest point ever in terms of approval rating. He is unpopular with independents and probably shouldn't actually be highlighted in the general election if Republicans are trying to win swing states or swing districts. But he is only hearing what he wants to hear. You know, Natalie Hart brings him his friendly materials from friendly news outlets. Just the other day at a rally, he was saying the reason Republicans might lose is because he's not on the ballot, that they would win if he was on the ballot. So he's sort of conceding that Republicans are in danger in these midterm elections, but he does seem mostly concerned about himself, his legacy, his standing with the public, and he believes, wrongly, that he's still widely popular.
I'm guessing she did not bring him yesterday's Wall Street Journal featuring Stan Druckenmiller's opinion piece about Scott Bessent. Democrats, though, they need to focus on two things, right? Accountability and affordability. And we're starting to see on the accountability front, Zach, the idea that they're possibly planning probes into the president's team if they win the majority. I'm talking corruption. How important is this for Democrats to lay it out? Because this is one of the reasons so many Democratic primary voters were not feeling good about establishment Democrats. They were saying, when are you going to fight back? When are you going to hold Donald Trump accountable? Is that what they're trying to show now?
That's absolutely right. And the important thing here is to try and connect that corruption to what's actually happening in voters' lives, that their lives are materially worse because Donald Trump is so focused on vanity and vendettas. And you see both of these things coursing through everything he's doing nowadays. With vanity, you have everything from, the Kennedy Center, which his administration is now floating the possibility of raising altogether, to...
That is so bananas, I can't even get my head around it. But can we just pause? I know we're out of time. Tell me this. Who are the voting public? Who are the Republican voters who are saying, right on, let's tear down the Kennedy Center?
I don't know that there's anyone that's really motivated by this except for Donald Trump. And that's the real problem, is that what is interesting to Trump and what he is focused on is at odds with what is in the best interests of Republicans and what voters actually care about. You have the ballroom, you have the arch, you have the IndyCar race, you have the Kennedy Center, the list goes on, the helipad, thing after thing after thing that have nothing to do with the material quality of life that Americans face right now. At the same time, you have vendettas, whether it's, going after his political opponents with the DOJ, or whether it's trying to rename Lake Ontario Lake America. These are not things that voters care about. These are not the things that are really driving them. And so when they go by the gas station and see those big numbers, or go to the grocery store and are paying $6.89 for a pound of ground beef, they are wondering what the heck is going on in Washington, that Washington seems so disconnected from what is happening in their lives.
My goodness. Zach, thank you so much. Michael, Luke, thank you as well. When we come back, as Pete Hegseth is bragging about high recruitment, we're seeing more and more troops eyeing the exit. Why the latest military actions have them questioning their own moral beliefs. And remember, if you like watching the show, join us. Money, Power, Politics is coming to you live. Our first live audience show slated for Thursday, September 17th at CNBC World Headquarters in Englewood Cliffs, New Jersey. You can possibly be there. Scan the QR code on your screen. Sign up for a chance to get a ticket. I'd love to see you there. Money, Power, Politics is back in just 90 seconds. More and more American service members want out of the military, saying what they have seen in the last few months has challenged their moral beliefs. MS Now spoke to 5 such troops as part of new reporting out this morning. One was concerned the military blew up Iranian bridges that were not military targets. Another thinks the Pentagon is not doing enough to prevent civilian deaths. A man who runs a hotline to help service members be discharged, as contentious objectors say they have seen applications increase by 6 times their normal rate.
We talked to people who, were true believers, who joined out of a deep sense of duty and of service, and have gone through this profound, deep moral exploration of what they are capable of doing and what they have seen over the past, their lifetime, but also the past several years, and in particular, the actions with Southern Spirit and Epic Fury have caused them to completely change in their beliefs and what they're able to be part of.
MS Now is not identifying any of the troops because they are still waiting on a final decision on their application. The Defense Department did not respond to our request for comment. Priya Sridhar, Pentagon reporter for MS Now, is one of the reporters on this very important story. She joins us now. Priya, America has seen plenty of wars, even in the last 30 years. What is different now?
Well, Steph, I think it's the wars that the United States has decided to start over the last year, which is what makes this time period much different. I spoke to a service member who was deployed in support of Operation Epic Fury, which, of course, is the war on Iran. And this service member told me that they believe they were being ordered to target and blow up civilian infrastructure, which, of course, is a violation of international humanitarian law as defined by the Geneva Accords. And when the service member brought up those concerns several times with their chain of command, they were told that those bridges and other pieces of civilian infrastructure were dual use, which means they were being used for both civilian purposes but also military purposes, which, if true, would technically make them legal. I also spoke to two service members who were deployed in support of Operation Southern Spear, which, of course, is the military campaign that President Trump started last September, which led to 60 strikes on small vessels that were allegedly carrying narco-terrorists and drugs into the United States that led to the killing of 210 different people. The administration, of course, categorized those drug cartels as designated terrorist organizations. But the two service members I spoke to said that they're not convinced that the intelligence or the justification there was given that the people who were on these small boats were, in fact, narco-terrorists. And they believe that perhaps they were blowing up innocent civilians, which is similar to what we've heard from the president of Colombia, who said that he believes that there were innocent fishermen who were killed in many of these strikes that you're seeing right now. So it's being asked to violate international law, Steph. They also pointed to the surge in civilian deaths. Many of them talked about that Manab school bombing in Iran, where 150 schoolgirls and teachers were killed, which, of course, the United States has never taken responsibility for. There's an investigation right now, but we haven't seen the findings there. And then last thing, Steph, I want to point out is very similar to what we've been hearing from the service members and their families on the USS Abraham Lincoln, which is that they don't feel as though there's any sort of justification or explanation to any of these wars that we're waging around the world. They say that they don't really feel as though there's like an existential threat to the United States of America, or that they're, participating in these wars for the purposes of national defense. And I think that that is fundamentally what's leading them to file these conscientious objector applications.
Priya, this is super important reporting, and I'm so glad you're bringing it to us. Thank you so much. When we return, some Democrats have abandoned their Senate races in ruby red states to make way for independents. But their plan to disappear the Democrat has backfired in the state of Montana after the Democrat there refused to bow out. That candidate joins us later in the program, but right after the break, Canada punching back, hitting the U.S. with dollar-for-dollar tariffs after Trump reignited a trade war with one of our biggest partners. And I'm going to say this, our neighbor, our friend, Canada. My question, why? More Money, Power, Politics next. All right, we are on top of major breaking news in the tech world. Meta, the parent company of Facebook, has reached a settlement in a huge lawsuit filed by more than 24 states. The states accuse the company of misleading customers about the safety of its products, intentionally getting children addicted to them, and improperly collecting their data. We are still reading through the court documents, but it looks like the penalty could max out at more than $16 billion. The trial was in its second week in California. If the company lost, Meta could have faced hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars in damages. Joining me now, Neil Irwin, Chief Economic Correspondent at Axios, and Jeffrey Sonnenfeld. I'm so glad he's here, Senior Associate Dean for Leadership Studies at Yale School of Management. Jeffrey, I get that on its face, people are going to be like, wow, it could be $16 billion. $16 billion is not much. We thought it was going to be hundreds of billions. What do you think?
It's unbelievable. This was, a $1.4 trillion lawsuit that here you have 29 states, red states and blue states combined, and it's being tried in Oakland, California, by a very good attorney general who somehow they've dropped the ball on this, because this was a home court advantage for Rob Bonta, the attorney general, a Democrat, and of course, California, a blue state. This was a very favorable setting. Everybody was anticipating there's going to be tens of billions of dollars, not this mere 16 billion. It is a mere 16. That's 2 weeks of revenues for just 2 weeks of revenues.
That's what people need to understand. Like, because someone's going 16 billion. That's peanuts for Meta.
2 weeks revenue.
And it sets an excellent precedent for them. Like, we thought this lawsuit was just the first, and there were going to be so many behind it.
Oh, the victim stories were devastating. You had Frances Hagen, who testified, who was in my class various times, the whistleblower inside, of course, of Meta, had pointed out just the way they were trafficking in minors' data, that they intentionally were using Instagram to bait them young, and the record was so devastating that, as Zuckerberg said this, he said, "Settle. I don't want this to go to trial." And they settled so low. They could have gotten so much better a deal out of them. And the cautionary tale for other social media is, hey, who cares? We can go right ahead. I mean, this was a law. This was an old law. It was a law from 2000. It wasn't one of these newer ones. It was John McCain's law and Frank Lautenbach's law, and a Nevada Democrat who's now is no longer senator anymore, named Brian. Is that these three sponsored a very strong law, bipartisan law, and the violations, I'm no attorney, but they seemed pretty egregious in terms of entrapping kids, enticing them, entrapping them, and trading in their data without their knowledge, underage kids. And the victim stories were so devastating that this was going to be a very difficult case for all of social media companies. And now what's happening? You look at the markets right now as we're speaking, Stephanie. Meta stock is up 6%.
He took the words right out of my mouth. The Meta stock is going to soar today. This is going to cost them nothing.
Yeah, look, there are some agreements they made in this agreement, apparently, where 2-hour cap on teenagers being able to use Instagram,
sure.
Limit on overnight. So there's some stuff in here that implies changing the way the company works and the way the products work going forward. But you're right. We have this broad crisis of mental illness, depression, general kind of malaise and unhappiness, especially among younger people. And I think you can really draw a direct line from the social media that so many have consumed so much of the time, and this broader kind of crisis of mental health. The idea that $16-17 billion and some limitations change that, it's not at all clear to me.
So my message to Rob Bonta, I know we just had you on to talk about Paramount. If you'd like to come back on to talk about this, I got a lot of questions for you. All right, in other businesses.
And he's a Yale alum, too, and we like him. What's going on?
Yale alum. Okay, let's talk about other business news. Canada is now punching back against President Trump's trade war, unleashing new retaliatory tariffs on hundreds of U.S. products, from aluminum to lobster. The tariffs are ranging from 15 to 50%. Like, do you hear how exasperated I sound? Because this is so ridiculous and pointless. You and I both know Mark Carney very well. This is crazy that this is even happening. So unnecessary. It's going to hurt both of our countries.
Mark Carney is classy. Mark Carney is really dignified. And Mark Carney is probably going to become the most popular prime minister in Canada's history. Lester Pearson, before you were born, but when I was a child, was considered the most unifying prime minister of Canada. And Brian Mulroney, second to him, who created the free trade agreements. However, a third might have been Pierre Trudeau, the father. But now we have seen that Mark Carney has every part of Canada across political parties so unified. And a lot of this is the histrionics. People have said that, like Macron, President Macron has said, nobody has unified Europe as much as President Trump has in a negative reaction than since Charlemagne. And it's a similar thing here, is that people who have major differences, political, cultural, ethnic, and things, have all unified in Canada against the U.S. But in terms of the dollar issues, it's just so strange. President Trump is saying, who's the idiot president that brought about this horrible, unfair deal? This is his deal.
Correct.
This is USMCA in 2020.
Maybe the best thing Jared Kushner did in Trump's first term was USMCA. Neil, what is your take here? Because economically, it makes no sense. But politically, if I'm Mike Rogers in Michigan, if I'm Susan Collins in Maine, right now I'm saying, are you kidding me?
Yeah, look, we've seen this over and over. The president does not seem very focused on helping Republicans win these tight congressional races and Senate races. And this is the latest example. Look, there are two asymmetries here, and the president seems to be focused on the economic asymmetry. The U.S. economy is 10 times bigger than the Canadian economy. Therefore, they need us more than we need them. But he's forgetting the political asymmetry, which is he's not very popular right now. Mark Carney is very popular in Canada, and the Canadian people are united. Doug Ford, the provincial leader, conservative. This is a bipartisan thing in Canada of being really outraged at U.S. behavior, and you're seeing that in just the resolve of the Canadian people to deal with the pain of these higher tariffs in exchange for really standing up for themselves and their sense of nationhood.
Can I add to those excellent insights? Just a why now?
Excellent insights. Yes.
They are very good.
They are.
Is that why now? It's because USMCA came up. The original terms expired. It was up for negotiation in the beginning of July. Well, the negotiations failed, but they could have just rolled over it with the same terms. Trump created this non-issue. Trump has completely manufactured this. There's no reason to go into Iran just then. There's no reason to go into Venezuela. Greenland's not an issue. It's because of the other issues you talk about on this show. It's the affordability and the accountability you were talking about before the break.
Jeffrey, I cannot even figure out what Americans are saying to the president. Like I was even looking in my own social media comments after I was breaking down how this trade war, and anyone who was saying, like, we need to do this, we need to fight back against Canada, I would dig in. Every single one of them were bots. This is just Donald Trump's nonsensical vengeance that does not help any American businesses or any American voters. Neil, let me ask you quickly about inflation for a moment. Data out this morning is showing it is still an issue, higher than the Federal Reserve would like it to be. If you look at where interest rates are, despite what Scott Bessent is trying to do, the market is saying, things don't look great.
Yeah, we really seem to be settled in around 3% inflation, well above the 2% the Fed targets. And keep in mind, that's 3% inflation over and above the inflation of the last 5 years. So, when people say they're unhappy with the cost of living, with affordability, that's what they're talking about, the cumulative inflation over the last 5 years. And there's just not the credibility right now that it's coming down to 2 like the Fed wants. Kevin Warsh is speaking on Friday in Jackson Hole. I'm heading there tomorrow. We'll see what he has to say about the direction of policy going forward, whether they're going to do something more aggressive to try and bring inflation back to their target.
Neil, once again, I agree with everything you said, but what we just saw in the CPE data, the core data, is up 3.7%. I would round that up a lot closer to 4 than to 3. This is twice what the Fed's target is. So this is not good data. The inflation is really there. There's some who expected maybe it'd be even worse than that, but this is a genuine concern. And the consumer good prices are going up. We know that oil is going up. And we know that Putin's behind it all, but that's a whole nother story.
That's a whole other segment that Jeffrey will be back for. Neil, travel safe. Jeff, thank you for being here. Before we go, we just got I want to read a passage from the statement that was released by AG Rob Bonta, Yale alumni, outlining some of the reforms as part of the settlement. Here we go. Today's settlement includes default daily time limits on social media and a block on overnight use that can only be lifted by a parent, enhanced parental supervision tools, robust age assurance measures to detect users under the age of 18 and children under 13 that are on the platform, and the appointment of an independent auditor to oversee compliance. That is a portion from Rob Bonta's statement, and I'm just going to reiterate, I would love to have him back on this show to discuss this and more when we return. My next guest faced pressure to drop her Senate bid in Montana to help boost an independent candidate, but she refused. Democrat Alani Bankhead joins us when Money Power Politics returns. The Democratic Party is facing tough Senate races in deep red states, so many of its candidates are trying a new strategy, dropping out. Democratic Senate nominees who were on the ballot in Idaho, South Dakota, and Nebraska, states where Donald Trump won by wide margins in 2024, have all stepped aside to let the independent candidate take the ticket. But Montana's Democratic candidate for Senate, Alani Bankhead, is holding firm and staying in that race. She is on the ballot with 3 other candidates, and some Democrats have called for her to drop out. But her challenger, independent Seth Bodnar, spoke to us last week and would not go that far. What is your reaction to Bankhead staying in? I'm guessing you're not happy.
No, actually, I never once asked for Alani Bankhead to drop out. I didn't ask for Kurt Alme to drop out. We've always been planning that this would be a 4-way race.
You need to win a race. It wouldn't be better for you if she wasn't in it. Like, let's have an honest conversation.
You know, look, I don't know that it would. A lot of the political pundits think that, and I hear it, right? And they, okay, one-on-one, that's easier on the one hand. On the other hand, people are fed up with a system that they feel like is rigged against them.
Montana's Democratic Senate nominee, Alani Bankhead, joins me now. Alani, thank you for being here. What do you say to those who want you to leave the race because they think an independent will have a better chance of winning against a Republican?
Good morning. Thanks for having me. So I would say that that was the Democratic strategy to fix politics in red states. But the reality is you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You have to address the brand of the Democratic Party first and foremost. So absolutely, we're not going to step aside. We're going to respect the democratic process and respect the votes of 48,000 Montanans.
But the reality is, if you and Bodnar both stay in the race, you are going to, both of you, you are going to lower the chances for either one of you to win.
I don't know about that. You know, it's a really great point that you're making. And obviously, there's been a lot of political analysis done on the numbers. But, you know, Trump he won Montana with 46% of the vote. Almy started post-primary at 40%, and his numbers are going down. We also have a libertarian in the race, which a lot of people forget about, poor Kyle Austin, who also draws away from the Republican vote. And the other thing to remember, too, is if you're outside of Montana, often people think Montana is purely red, and it's not. It is a purple state. Montanans don't care if you're blue or red. If you're stuck in a snow ditch, they're going to come by and help you. They just want to know that you're going to help fix a fence at the end of the day. That's been our history as a state. So common sense legislation and common sense leadership is really what people want. And I think Montana is going to surprise America in November.
And what do you say to those who say, look at the polls, you're not being realistic?
Oh, that's so super interesting because there actually hasn't been an independent poll done on this race since about April timeframe. So before the primary, all the polls that have come out have been bought and paid for by Republicans or the independents and using dark money that, of course, is going to skew it towards their particular candidate. And so I would say the polls, you know, if they were accurate, Hillary would have won. There are a number of candidates in this state who have run in statewide races in the past who were statistically winning at this point, who actually lost in the general election. So that's the beauty of the democratic process is we have to let the people decide on November 3rd.
What is different about Montana than, let's say, the other states that I outlined where candidates did drop out for the independent? What's special about Montana that we might not understand in New York?
Well, I think first and foremost, in at least a couple of the states, it was actually a very significant pressure campaign to push those candidates out, including the South Dakota candidate whose house was mysteriously set on fire. And so we experienced a lot of that pressure campaign as well. We just didn't cave to it because Montana's spirit is we hate bullies and we stand up to them. Montana has a rich history of standing up to bullies. We had the Copper Kings where they literally bought a Senate seat and it actually paved the way partly for the 17th Amendment. And right now we're in the era of the tech baron kings all over again because all roads lead to AI data centers, especially in Montana. Montanans love their land. They love their environment. Over my dead body are our public lands going to be taken and exploited by AI data centers. And so Montanans are rising up and we see that at the grassroots level, which is something that makes Montana very special and unique. We had one person turn off an AI data center in Bonner, Montana. There's an uprising in Yellowstone County right now. One person really can make a difference. It's not a cheesy statement. It's actually happening right now and history is repeating itself.
All right. Quickly before we go, would you like Bodnar to drop out?
I don't really care if he drops out or not.
All right, then. Good luck to you, Alani. Thank you for joining me this morning. One person can always make a difference. When we come back, let's talk about an extraordinary person from her glittering stardom to a heart as big as her hair. Dolly Parton did something that very few can do, capture nearly universal affection. We pay tribute to the queen of country music and the extraordinary legacy she leaves behind. Money, Power, Politics returns in 2 minutes. I wasn't sure how I was going to do the show today because this is the only story on my mind. The world is remembering Dolly Parton, the country music superstar and cultural icon who passed away yesterday after being hospitalized in Nashville, Tennessee. She was 80 years old. Her publicist said she had fought a brief battle with cancer. Her nephew, Brian Seaver, who was part of her security detail almost his whole life, announced the news on social media. And here's just a bit of what he had to say.
By her example, we believed that anything was possible. She never saw a door she couldn't open, and the doors she opened made and changed history. Dolly called me and said she wants to rest in a beautiful bed of plush cotton because after a life wearing heavy rhinestones, she finally deserves to be comfortable and have some rest. Rest in peace, Aunt Dolly.
Even though Dolly Parton became a legend as a singer and songwriter, she was also an actor and entrepreneur, and maybe most importantly, and what she cared about the most, she was a philanthropist. Tributes from across the country and around the world have been pouring in, and President Trump has ordered flags to be lowered to half-staff nationwide for 1 week in her honor. You know, I'm so happy to have my next guest because I love him to death, but I wish he was here on a different story. Co-host of Morning Joe and host of Sunday Today, my dear friend and New Jersey native, Willie Geist.
Hi, Steph.
You went to school in Nashville. Your daughter is now at school in Nashville. You've interviewed Dolly several times. Tell us about her.
When I went to college in 1993, we drove from New Jersey to Nashville, and we stopped at Dollywood.
You and your mom and dad?
Because that's what you do. When you're driving through East Tennessee, you have to go to Dollywood. I never forgot it. I got a chance over these last, 15 years or so. I think I interviewed her 7 or 8 times. It's one of those things when Dolly calls, you come. So she'd say, Willie, we're putting it in a roller coaster. Would love to talk to you about it. Yes, ma'am, I'll be right down. And we'd sit and have these great conversations about the roller coaster, but mostly about life and her career and what she built down there. And yes, Dollywood is a cool theme park, but really at the core of it, I always was struck by this sitting with her there, was that in this place where has a amusement park in her name, just on the other side of the mountain was the cabin she grew up in with 11 siblings, and literally no electricity, running water, a father who couldn't read or write. I mean, it's the definition of the rags to riches story. And she used to say, we did have running water in that we'd had to run down to the river to get it, but we didn't have plumbing. And so she built this place as a tribute to all the people that she came up with and grew up with. And she created tens of thousands of jobs at that theme park, at their convention center, and everything they do down there. And that's really what it was about. And raised money all across that community. There were wildfires in East Tennessee 10 years ago, and she started what she called the My People Fund. These are my people. And she said, if your house burned down in the fire, I'm going to give you $1,000 a month till you get back on your feet. Who does that?
Dolly Parton.
Dolly Parton does that, and that was all real, and that was her heart, and it wasn't some PR play. It was really how she felt, that all the success she had, she owed to all those people.
But that's sort of the thing, you know, like she was so universally loved. You're laughing at me. Like,
I'm not. No, I'm laughing. I'm smiling because she was universally loved. Name another person.
But this is my point.
Name another person.
So few people are universally loved, right? Not in everything that she did. Why? What was it that was different about her?
She was authentic. She was kind and generous. She was talented beyond belief. We haven't even talked about the music yet. The 3,000 songs she wrote, the 25 #1 hits. All these iconic songs, but she also stayed somehow above politics and transcended, even when she was asked directly about it lately.
Even though she spoke out, right? Even though she spoke her mind in some controversial issues, she never wavered.
She never wavered. She wasn't self-conscious about it. She would say, we're all God's creatures. She was a defender of LGBTQ people to the end. She talked about that, wasn't scared to talk about that. Only God can judge you. And so she lived that life. She walked that walk. If you really believe all the things I sing about and talk about love and light and faith, then we've got to protect all people. And that was kind of her message above and beyond politics.
Okay, it's funny that you keep saying the word above, because I watched an interview that she and Burt Reynolds, like you don't ever see Burt Reynolds blush. And it was one of her first acting roles. And Burt was asked, like, how's Dolly going to do in Hollywood? And he's like, she's going to eat him up, because there's no one more authentic, more real, harder working. This is Burt Reynolds, like the coolest of the cool. And I watched him look at her enamored. Like, was everyone in her orbit just enamored by her?
Yeah, and when you go and spend time with her, you spend a day with her, like you go to Dollywood, and you see how all these people there feel about her. She would do a thing when she was in town at Dollywood where during the day, this is very royal, she would do a parade, like in a carriage, through the grounds of
like
the park.
Pope.
Yeah, like the Pope. And the sides were roped off and all her fans were there. And I got to sit with her and ride and go on this ride through the park and watch her be loved, but also to love all those people. And she talked, and not in a way that was getting her any attention or anything. She talked to me privately about, look at all these faces. Black, white, Asian, people of different faiths. I see Muslim people are here. I see people who are gay who are here. And she really was so proud of that. She said, I wanted to build this place, this haven where people could come and, oh, by the way, in the process, take care of the place. I grew up in the place that made me. So There'll just never be another one. There'll never be another Dolly. And everyone I interview in the world of country music, and I'm talking about women and men, mention her unsolicited every
She
time.
was Jerry Garcia's favorite female singer of all time. Jerry Garcia.
Thank you. That's it. And look at her recent collaborations with Beyonce, with Sabrina Carpenter, with Post Malone.
Yes.
Like, everybody wanted to sing with her because of who she was.
I'm so lucky to have had this conversation with you.
Thanks, Steph.